Welcome, Leeward listeners, to the Live Pono, Love Pono podcast. Today, we are excited to speak again to José Barzola, the conflict and peace specialist at UH Mānoa. We have previously had José on a podcast about an online workshop that CAPS was a part of. Thank you so much today for listening on Spotify, KTUH, or wherever you find our podcasts, and we hope that you enjoy this episode. José Barzola is the conflict and peace specialist at UH Mānoa with extensive experience in administration, student development, and peace building. José is pursuing his PhD in educational administration in higher education and specializes in peace building, conflict transformation, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. José is actively involved in community engagement, facilitating dialogues and action planning on many social justice as well as equity issues. José, thank you so much for being here. Could you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Alex, thank you so much for having me again. It's always a joy to connect and to just see where the conversation goes. N- Thank you. That was a really beautiful introduction. But in general, I am the conflict and peace specialist here at the University of Manoa. My name is José Barzola. I am been in this position for about 17 months now, where I basically provide conflict services and programming as it relates to conflict. A lot of the programming that I develop is focused on dialogue and cross-cultural understanding. It's been my experience that that's really kind of at the core of where a lot of the conflicts arise. And when I mention dialogue, I'm talking about conversations that involve a form of like a voice, a tone, not necessarily just emails and messaging, which I know can be interpreted as conversations as well. Um, and when I talk about cross-cultural understanding, it's not just understanding different perspectives around the world, but also just right here at home within your own neighborhoods, your own households. We have a different lived experience that we've grown up with. Even if you're like a twin, grew up in the same bedroom, there's different way that you see life. And that, you know, um, perspective is kind of what shapes how we move about in the world and what we decide to do. And sometimes I think if we get away from that concept and having a little more compassion and empathy toward each other is where, a little more frustration arises and conflict arises from that because we start wondering, well, why doesn't so and so see it my way? And so I think part of it's just having those ongoing conversations, uh, having that cross-cultural lens to, and I think in the work that I do, a lot of it's like, being conscientious of like always like asking like kind of I always talk about like leaning into your discomfort. And what I mean by that is exploring what are we not covering, Um, because part of my work is about listening to what's not being said, the nonverbals, the in
Of course, yeah.
between,
Mm.
because many times folks just either they're not comfortable, they just don't know what to share as we're trying to build trust and rapport. And so yeah, and not only looking at the in between conversations, but also between the work that I'm doing myself and what's not being captured in that space. So yeah, thank you for having me today, then. Appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, no, I really love the way you word that, looking at the in between. Part of what we do at Love Pono is sort of, I like to say, like having these conversations that maybe people didn't have in their household, like maybe it was you it wasn't just something you talked about. It wasn't something your friend group talked about. It wasn't something your peer group talked about, your family talked about. And like you said, actual dialogue, not just, quick emails or quick check-ins or small talk, if you will, but actual dialogue about important issues. Because, it's worth a lot more than it just seems when you say it so quickly. It's so important because so many folks aren't doing it. So many folks are just kind of um, avoiding certain topics essentially, and we all know that doesn't get too much change done. But that's a whole other conversation, right? But I really appreciate your introduction, and we're just fascinated by what you do here at Love Pono. We're always just so grateful to attend any of your events or just see what you're up to because you do a great job just corresponding and getting in touch with our community and really talking about important topics. I wonder, how do you apply your expertise in conflict management and peace building to assist the University of Hawaii at Manoa community through your role as a conflict and peace specialist?
Thank you for your kind words. I, as far as your question goes, I think, I mean, a big portion of the work that I do, I look at it more into how do we develop healthy, positive relationships. And I try to approach it from that end because if I approach it from the terminology aspect of peace and conflict or peace building, conflict management, and all the other, what I've learned in my time is that I never, going back to people's lived experience, I never know what might be a trigger,
Mm,
and I never know who's in the audience, and I never know what might, sway people away from the conversation. And
mhm,
so I like to think that by exploring the conversation around how do we develop some healthy, positive relationships, most folks in an audience can think about, someone special in their life, someone who has, they know that if they're going through a hard time, they can call or message, and either they'll pick up or respond in a few minutes and be like, I'll call you right back. So there's someone special. I'd like to think everyone has someone special in their life that they can turn to. And for folks who may not, I'm always like, there's 24/7 hotlines, definitely. And
yeah.
and also just being aware that the village, what is the village that
Hmm.
uplifts you? Thinking about that. I mean, a lot of the work that I do is around storytelling because I think that's really at the core of the work that we do. And it's more of a conversation piece. I'm not here to lecture. I'm not here, and it's more of interactive conversation. But thinking about those shared experiences that you've developed with those special people in your life, it's those shared experiences that were kind of the building blocks that led to this special relationship that you have today. And reflecting upon, not only what were those shared experiences, but also thinking about what other shared experience have you had that maybe you didn't take advantage of as an opportunity to
Mm,
build community. We go to the movies, we go to an athletic event, we'll talk about it most of the times, and hey, that's great. We're doing reflection, introspection there. But let's say you finish a meeting. I'm going to guess the majority of people who went through a 1 hour or longer meeting are going to be like, let's talk about that meeting we just had.
mhm, mhm.
Because what I've learned is as you as you laugh a little, and that's kind of the response I get every time I mention that is that most
Mhm.
folks don't have impactful meetings, and most meetings, unfortunately, the experience is that, oh, that could have been an email.
Mm,
That
mhm,
could have just been an email, and so it kind of brings up another conversation about like how could these meetings that are happening be more intentionally used to build community as opposed
yeah.
to just disseminate information and just have people listen to you. So, and not just in meeting spaces, in classroom spaces, I'd like to think, there's a lot of engaging and critical thinking and discussions
Mhm,
happening in the classroom spaces, but I also know that's also not the case in places.
mhm,
I've been on the side of being a student and still am a student at times, but or you just go into a space and it's like people just lecturing, and
mhm.
and it's like, oh, you can talk to the TA or during your discussion session for those questions you may have. And so there, once more, missed opportunities to build community.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that's a big portion of my expertise and the work that I do. Because once you build community, that's where you're building rapport and trust. And ideally, it also makes it, it's almost like a shorthand. If you think
Mhm.
about, those special, going back to those special people in your life, you almost have like a special code, special language that you have. You don't have
For
to
sure.
like finish that train of thought because got it. I know exactly
For sure.
where you're going with this. And so wouldn't it be wonderful that you're able to build a community where that's a little bit more common than not?
For
So
sure.
yeah.
No, I think that's wonderful. It sounds like, you you realize this sort of responsibility that can be held from having these sort of sessions. If you are taking an hour of somebody's time, making it meaningful, making it intentional, as you said. And, I really just appreciate that because, as we were giggling about earlier, sometimes that isn't the case, right? Like you said, yeah, maybe that could have been an email, but no, people's time is is precious, and maybe even just reminding them of that, and reminding of, hey, with this time, this is what we have the potential to do. This is the catalyst of change that we can bring, a maybe even a domino effect, and maybe even a pay it forward kind of thing. So I think it's really wonderful what you do, and I really appreciate that you sort of prefaced the beginning of that answer talking about, at the core, you are focused on healthy and positive relationships, which obviously here at Love Pono we are as well. So thank you so much. Uh, so we talked a little bit about your workshops. I've been to a few myself. Can you tell us a little more about those and their successes? Maybe some of the ones that stuck out to you over the time you've been doing your work, and what are some key resources through these workshops that CAPS provides to perform to what are some key resources through these workshops that CAPS provides to support UH Manoa as well as the broader community in navigating conflicts and promoting peace?
No, thank you. So the workshops or the programming, which I tend to call peace building initiatives, and it's one of those things where the name came to me before the definition, but it just so in conflict management styles, there's five, and sometimes we look at, in order to achieve the best goal and to have a best relationship, what we were striving for is collaboration. And so that's really at the core of a lot of the work that I do. And so, with that in mind, I never wanted to seem as though it's me, myself, and I doing everything, because it's not. And the reality is, like, even this interaction right here is part of a collaboration. And I thank you for the opportunity to be here, and also to be able to be on the platform to and have a space with your listeners
Of
and your
course.
viewers. So it's about the village that uplifts you throughout the
Hmm.
process. And so with that, so as a conflict and peace specialist, or CAS for short, I have these peace building initiatives, which I define as collaborative ways of developing healthy, positive relationships via dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, exploring ways to shift our own perspective to build compassion and empathy within our communities. And within that space, we have different programming. One of the ones that has been consistent since I've I started with the position is something I developed called the community dialogues. And it's exactly what it is. It's a gathering. It's always set in a space. Well, there's an in-person and a virtual setting.
Hmm.
Because especially like post-pandemic, I saw
Yeah,
the
it's
benefit of
inclusive.
having
Hmm.
virtual, yeah, just trying to be inclusive. And
Hmm.
surprisingly, we get more of a turnout virtually than in person, because it's just comfort of your own
Yeah,
home. You can
for
join from
sure.
wherever you are.
Yeah.
Um, but for the in-person, I try to find spaces that are like study lounges or gathering spaces, not a classroom, because you spend enough time in the classroom. So I'm trying to also introduce folks to new spaces on campus. And we just have tables, or we have chairs in a circle. It's almost like talking circles in a way, for folks who've participated in that kind of programming. And there's different topics. And really, for the most part, the premise is, yeah, there's an internal agenda that I work with a facilitator or myself. So it started out in fall 23 with four topics that I led. I did bring on two other students to help out with some of them. And what's evolved from there was about seven grad students in the spring 2023. And so we ended up with 11 topics then. And since there's always in person and online, so that's 22 sessions. And then for this fall, we've had once more going with that model, as folks kind of would come in a couple times, then I would approach them about, like, hey, would you like to lead your own? And yeah, we just get around a circle. There's a topic. We have open-ended questions just to get the conversation going. And it all depends on who's in the room and what people want to share. So no
Hmm.
two conversations are, even if we're redoing the same title from last semester, this semester,
Hmm.
the conversations are going different places. And that's the beauty of it, I think. And at the this semester we have 12 topics, so 24 sessions. And the beauty of it has been that at the the it's like to build community. That's really all it
Hmm.
is. And we start seeing people coming back, and it's been great, and it's intergenerational as well. And we we have undergrads and grad students and faculty and staff joining in. For the virtual sessions, I opened it up to the larger. So going to your question of the larger community, it's
Hmm.
open to whoever wants to join in. So I've had folks, Kapuna from like Molokai joining us, and another one from
Oh, wow.
Hawaii. There's one from Hawaii Island that comes
Oh,
every week.
nice.
She's
Oh, great.
uh, Tutu just is so wonderful and drops some really beautiful knowledge every week and just
You're really building a community.
yeah, it
It's so
is. And we
cool.
actually had someone from New Zealand the other day and some from
Oh, so
Texas
cool.
yesterday. So yeah, but even like the person from Texas, they're a student here. They're just taking classes from Texas. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so yeah, so that's the beauty of it. And for folks, there's even people just like in the on-campus housing, which is not too far away, but it's just more
Yeah.
comfortable to be in your own space and join
Sure.
in. And
Sure.
we've had a lot of great support from the community. Native Hawaiian Place of Learning has us on their website, so they help us with advertising. Also, Native Hawaiian Student Services, I learned has like certain scholarships, and as part of that, they encourage their students to attend like three different events, and we're listed as one of the events they can choose from. And
Oh,
so
great.
it's nice to have, the community uplifting us and helping us reach new audiences where we haven't been able to before. So it's definitely been a scale in attendance. Another one is we do cross-cultural conversations where it happens every semester for like 5 or 6 weeks in a row for 90 minutes. It's all virtually. We have the opportunity, a speaker comes on for about 30, 40 minutes to do an interactive presentation about different perspectives of peace. And then we're joined in by not only audience students right here from Hawaii, but also students. There's a classroom at AK University in Hiroshima
Hmm.
that joins in.
Hmm.
So there's like 30 students over there. And
Wow.
not all those students are not from Japan. Like this
Uh-huh.
semester. They have also students from like Bangladesh and
Huh.
Pakistan, and
That's so neat.
yeah, there's a couple
Wow.
other places in Africa as well. I forget which ones off the top of my head right now, but yeah, just the whole idea of and so like I did a presentation on peace building and finding common ground last week, and so
Hmm.
five of the students have prepared also presentations on peace building as it relates to their countries, and
Hmm.
and so we were able to learn from each other, and that's the beauty of
Hmm.
different perspectives, how and sometimes yeah we have some difficult conversations along the
Yeah.
process. And I think that's part of the
Yeah.
growing. And then one of the ongoing ones is these virtual talk stories, which is, I think, you've joined us in the audience, and thank you so
Hmm.
much for your support.
Of course.
And with those, it's a lot of that actually started when I was in my previous role at the Matsunaga Institute for Peace, with
Hmm.
these like, I mean, it was a global pandemic in 2020, and
Hmm.
one of the positive things that came out of the pandemic is it was like a light bulb moment of like, oh, we could do virtual programming that can
Hmm.
connect folks wherever they may be, as long as they have access to technology.
Yeah.
And so I've seen the benefit of it, and obviously we had definitely more attendance with it during pandemic times, and
Hmm.
but nowadays people just they still register just because they know they can catch the recording later on, and that lives on in the
Hmm.
YouTube channel, Peacebuilding
Hmm.
Initiatives. But the beauty of it is just being able to provide a platform for all
Yeah.
folks to share. I mean, my general philosophy is that I think we have much to learn from each other.
Hmm.
And when I mean that, I mean from everyone, from our youth
Hmm.
to our elders to, and going back to like shifting our perspective, one of the things I'm always kind of checking in on myself, because I used to see how, yeah, there's other organizations doing virtual programming, and it would always be like the vice president or
Hmm.
the like co-founder or the
Hmm.
director of this coming on board, but you would never hear the other voices. What about the
Hmm.
people that work in those organizations? What about the students, right? And so that's been a wonderful opportunity to kind of explore that space and provide a platform for that. And I've had to actually from time to time I have students who either volunteer with me or they do their internship with me. So for different academic programs, sometimes they'll have their faculty and then I serve as like a supervisor, and so we can explore different types of programming they can develop that is within the world of peace building, and which is, to me, it's
For
relationship building.
sure.
So it's pretty
Hmm.
wide. And so yeah, and normally all I ask is at the end that I'm able, if they're comfortable, and most of them are okay with it, is having the opportunity to share about their experience, and where
Hmm.
I basically moderate and I get to interview them about it's, like a live journal basically that lives on. So in the spring, I had about six students, three undergrads, three grad students doing different projects. One was looking at the interrelationships of how food can strengthen relationships. So that was a wonderful project to support him as he was
Hmm.
doing that. Another one wanted to develop her own talk story series, which she called From Silos to Sirens, and did a beautiful job with that. And those recordings live on the YouTube, the
Yeah.
collaborative. I had two folks who were looking at peer mediation, restorative justice. These are grad students. One developed a peer mediation program. Um, right at the University Lab School, so helped
Hmm.
out with that. And then the other person was working over and he's still there at the Women's Correctional Facility and looking
Hmm.
at peer mediation, restorative justice practices. So I would kind of just provide what knowledge base or connect her
Yeah.
with the folks I know in the community to help her. And obviously, this was all for credit as she was trying to finish off her
Hmm.
program. But yeah, so that's just a few examples of some of the ways it goes beyond just the programming and
For
connects to
sure.
the community. As far as the virtual talk stories, I've been very thankful and honored that, and it's really a humbling experience that I get connected to speakers. I never have to searching for speakers, and it's just in our
Mm.
everyday conversations that we have.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, would you be interested? And most folks take me up. There's a couple of folks that will reach out to me through different social media platforms
Yeah.
and offer to be a speaker. And where normally they would charge, they'd be like, oh no, happy to just come
Mm.
on board. And
Mm.
so,
Hmm.
and I never know what are the dominoes, So we
Yeah.
did one,
Yeah. Dominoes again. Yeah.
yeah, we
So
did one
important.
last time we connected on this podcast, it was about the intergenerational trauma in the Asian
Hmm.
American Pacific Islander community with Francis, and
Hmm.
that led to other conversations. There's going to be the Interfaith Alliance of Hawaii is having an intergenerational trauma in-person event in November,
Yeah.
which I was just asked to. I'm in the in between right now. I might either be on the panel or I might be the moderator, depending upon how things
Wow.
pan
Well,
out.
that's
But
wonderful.
but yeah, so it's the dominoes. Like I never know
Yeah.
where it's gonna go, and that's how it connects to the community, I guess, as well.
Hmm.
And you never know who's in the audience, and it's always been wonderful throughout this journey to get to meet the audience and see how I can best be of service. So yeah, so that's just some of the
100%.
programming that's happening, and there are the conflict management workshops that I provide also just within different student groups as well as academic departments. It's just a general 1 hour, 90-minute session talking about kind of a lot of the things we're talking about today, building healthy,
Hmm.
positive relationships. What are some skill sets for, having difficult conversations, possibly some simulations, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a little bit of what's in the toolbox here.
Well, I love that was such a great answer. Thank you so much. I mean, something you mentioned in that answer was that we all have, so much to learn from each other. And I think that's why, having these sort of options and opportunities for folks is so important. So I just think what you do, and again, we're going to say that domino effect again, it just provides this opportunity for this domino effect. Like you don't know who it's going to affect. Like you said, I mean, you're talking to this university in Hiroshima, and they have students from here, students from here, students from here. I mean, what if this information could go to their family, to their peer group, and I mean, that's kind of how we change the world is people like you. So really do appreciate
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
And it sounds like, and this is something that I've experienced too, organizing just podcasts. It sounds like a lot of times these topics bring themselves to you, just based off what's happening in the world or just based off who you're being connected with or just based off the conversations that you're having. It's sort of like, wait, this this is important. Let's hone in on this. Let's focus on this and let's, bring it out to the world and see what they think too. So I think it's really, really great. So
Yeah,
we
no, thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank
Yeah,
you
of
so
course.
much. I one thing I forgot to mention, speaking of different
Yeah.
parts of the world, we actually do have an event coming up this Friday with two artists from the Congo
Oh, cool.
who
Oh,
are going to
wow.
join us from the Congo, 12-hour
Okay.
difference. And
Whoa.
yeah, I'm excited about it. It's a lot of the ongoing history of, unfortunately, genocide and the exploitation
Yeah.
and the violence that's been
Yeah.
happening over there.
Yeah.
And so they use that to kind of inspire the artwork that they do.
Wow.
And so yeah, and once more, it's the village, it's the
Yeah.
community that connected me to this. And then I think in November we're planning for, I say we, there's lots of folks besides
Yeah,
myself. I
of
just want
course. Of
to
course.
acknowledge the community in the village.
For sure.
Speaking with somebody in Pakistan
Wow.
who is has supporting Pakistan's out of school children. So
Okay.
through a nonprofit she developed, they basically, yeah, just do what they can to get students back, get them up and
Yeah.
going and then be able to go back into the school system. So I think once more, going back to that cross-cultural understanding, it's so important to shift our perspective. So when we're like, I'm always thinking like, if I ever complain that there's not enough paper for the printer, then there's something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. There you
Yeah.
go. Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for that background. And gosh, there's just so much. I'll be sure to, put the links to, your website and how people can find you
Thank
in
you.
this Spotify podcast description so people can actually
Thank you.
direct themselves towards that. So, yeah, thank you. Um, so, and speaking of your website and kind of maybe geared towards this cross-cultural referencing that we're mentioning, you do mention on the Conflict and Peace Specialist website that being an immigrant to the U.S. shapes your perspective in regard to the work that you do. Do you mind sharing a bit about your journey as an immigrant to the United States and how it has influenced your work as the conflict and peace specialist?
Thank you. I have to share that this is probably the first time that I put it on the website that I'm an
Hmm.
immigrant. I do share it from some time. Actually, so it's been an evolution.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of embracing your lived experience and sharing it. And because you never know who's in the audience, and you
Hmm.
never know, um, even when I introduce myself as José Barzola,
Hmm.
the original pronunciation of my name, I've gotten responses from that from the audience and being like, oh, actually, my name's also not pronounced the way it is. It's actually pronounced this way. And so we share this
Hmm.
beautiful moment, or this connection of having being away from the motherland of where you were born,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But going back to your, I guess it's part of going back to the inclusion aspect of it, and also going back to your question.
Hmm.
So yeah, I originally from Peru, in South America, in case folks don't know, and
Hmm.
uh, ended up immigrating at a very young age. Ended up in on the East Coast in Connecticut,
Hmm.
and uh, part of that experience, what it is the unknown.
Hmm.
Actually, we had a poetry workshop yesterday for the community dialogues, and the poem I that has always kind of lingered on in the, there's a lot of poems that I love, but one that's lingered on since I think I learned it when I was in probably elementary or middle school was The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think it just encompasses very well the my lived experience of, you know, going beyond, what I know in Peru and moving to United States, being many times throughout my lived experience the token in a
Hmm.
classroom, in a school setting,
Hmm.
sometimes within a town, uh,
Hmm.
and being expected to represent a larger community, and also
Hmm.
being conscientious to observe first before kind of speaking, understanding that whether I'm in a small town, whether I move to Hawaii, things are done differently everywhere. And
Hmm.
so just being appreciative, I guess, and honoring the space that I'm in, I think is part of that immigrant lens. Uh, and that's kind of how it ties into the work that I do here. Because, like, yeah, we're at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, but that doesn't mean that like every college, every department, school works the same. You know,
Hmm.
even within different offices, there's different cultures or communities. You know, it's like, you know, some spaces there's faculty that have lunch together every,
Yeah.
you know, all the time, while other spaces not so much.
Mm.
And it, you know, within you walk around the campus center and you see there's people connecting, commuting, but there's also people just on their earphones and just, you know,
Hmm.
in their own zone. So understanding
Hmm.
that, you know, we're all different and that's beautiful in itself. But being providing a space really for folks to be able
Yeah.
to connect. But yeah, so I was in Connecticut for a while, grew up, went to school there, and then did my grad, worked there professionally. Going into a career in higher education, which is not something most people go thinking about when they're like, I'm going to college to
Sure,
stay in
sure.
college for the next
Yeah,
few
yeah.
decades. Like, and so 2 decades and some change. Yeah, I'm still
There you
here.
go.
I
There you
wasn't,
go.
you know, I was at University of Connecticut, University of Massachusetts Amherst, Mercer University, New York, and
Hmm.
then here in Hawaii for a little over 9 years now. And so,
Wonderful.
but yeah, so that's just a little bit of the insights into
Cool.
how, yeah, I never know who's in the audience. And so I just try to and part of it's reclaiming my identity, you know, whether
Hmm.
it's the pronunciation of my name, the way that
Hmm.
I use the accent on the E, you know,
Yeah.
because so much of us we tend to accommodate because
Mm.
it's uncomfortable for folks, so we try to make it
Hmm.
comfortable. But at some point, we need to find, you know, what makes us, you know, fuller, you know,
Yeah,
and sometimes it's a return back to our origins, and so yeah,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I really appreciate you answering that question because, just when I saw that you had mentioned on the website, it, although I can't, resonate with it personally, I do know what it feels like when somebody mentions something that maybe I've experienced that isn't discussed about a lot, and sort of having that safe place, or just immediately feeling that level of comfort. Like you said, you don't never know who's listening, and you never know who's going to be affected, whose life is going to be changed. Who's listening to you say that and saying, you know what? I want to start making sure I say the correct pronunciation of my name. That's important to me too. And I can say that. Like I can firmly be confident and in saying what makes me, more whole as a person or comfort as a person. So you providing that space is just super wonderful. So I do appreciate you getting into the background of that question, because I do think it will resonate to a lot of listeners. So, if you could tell me, in what ways do you engage with organizations like Seeds of Peace and the Conflict Resolution Alliance to promote diversity, inclusion, as well as social justice through community events and action planning?
So they're both local nonprofits here in Hawaii. Seeds of Peace, I've been with since 2016 as one of their facilitators. And then at one point, I stepped into a program manager role briefly while they were in transition from different executive directors. But what attracted me to Seeds of Peace was at the time I was doing some research in sociology around school shootings and it's been over 20 years since school shootings became very unfortunately common here in the United States. And what I kept seeing was the results of it have just been very reactive. It's everything from
For sure.
metal detectors to
Mm.
weapons, security with weapons. We need to get weapons to the teachers. We need to create
Hmm.
rooms that can change into bulletproof rooms. And it was
Mm.
like even the training has changed where it used to be like hide and try to find a way
Hmm.
to escape and save yourself to hide. If you find an opportunity to rush the assailant, you should do that.
Mm.
Even though you may not survive, you'll be saving lives. So my thought was like, there's something wrong here. Like, and so all
Mm.
I could think about was like, how can we
It's kind of
take a
taking
pro
the humanity out of it.
Right, right.
Yeah,
It was just
yeah,
it was very reactive, unfortunately,
yeah, for
and
sure.
that's a very human. thing. We react to things. And so
Mm,
my thought was like, how can we be a little more proactive in the approach to
yeah.
this? And why I get things are moving fast and everything's so busy, but why can't we take a pause? Why can't we take a step back and explore like what is the culture that's nurturing this? That we think it's okay to continue with this.
Yeah.
And so as I was doing I came across Seeds of Peace, and they do this three-part workshop series, peace building, action planning with local community. At the time, it was just with adults like parents and educators and
Hmm.
counselors and teachers and to get them to develop, I mean, their whole slogan is a 360 approach to peace building. So to work with folks to get them to develop action planning, peace building action planning, they call it, uh, to address an issue. And the way it works is, it's not so much thinking about what is the issue initially, but let's focus on what is our vision for P? What is the vision that we'd love to develop? Let's think about
Yeah.
the beauty of it first before we think about what are the roadblocks and the barriers and all that kind of stuff. And so that little shift in perspective means so much. And so I've actually, so yeah, so I've been a facilitator with them for, yeah, like 8 years now, I guess. Yeah. And it's
Great.
been a very wonderful experience. And they've evolved where they also do the workshops with like youth as well. So it's like, as opposed to like having adults develop action plans that will impact youth, it's like let's have develop plans that will impact themselves, right?
Yes, of
And
course.
it's
Yeah.
brought
What a concept.
yes, yes,
I love it.
and I will say I'm very thankful also for when I first came on with them. They weren't only just doing the workshops here in Oahu, but they were also had a grant to do workshops on in Kona.
Oh, great.
And so that was actually how I got to visit Hawaii Island for the very first time. And what I loved about it is we would arrive in as the sun was just rising
Hmm.
and would get into a vehicle to go to the local high school, or we would do the workshop for the day. And then we would get back in the vehicle as the sun was coming down to get back to the airport. So I never truly like was a tourist and went places.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Hmm.
in those three or four workshop sessions that we did, I got to learn so much about Kona and Hawaii Island from the people themselves. What are the
Hmm.
issues impacting them?
Hmm.
And till this day, I will always have a deeper appreciation for that community and that space than when I went in next time and I was like, oh, I'm a tourist now, So
Sure,
it's
sure.
it's
Yeah.
like so much more enriching to like have that deeper
Hmm.
knowledge of it. But yeah, so with the action planning, I've added it to some of my classes. I do teach occasionally here at the university online asynchronously through the
Hmm.
Mountain Institute for Peace. And but what I do is I call it social justice action planning because I think because sometimes peace building isn't a very a
Hmm.
word that kind of piques people's ears. But when you say social
Hmm.
justice, because the work that's being
Hmm.
done, it's social justice work. It's like how can
Yes,
we look
of
at an
course.
issue and make a change with it proactively. And so yeah, so that's kind of how it ties in to social justice. Now, as far as the Conflict Resolution Alliance, they're a group of mediators, facilitators, folks who across the not only the Hawaii Islands, but nowadays also there's members across the United States. But yeah, I basically was approached by them back in I think 2017, 2018 to join in.
Hmm.
I've been a train mediator facilitator for over a decade now. I got trained initially in New York and then ended up here. While I was still working at the Mānoa Institute for Peace as a staff person there, I would then be a practitioner out in the community
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
I could fit it into my time. And so yeah, I have had the honor to be on the board. I was also a past president of the organization. It just happens to be I was president in 2020 during the pandemic.
Wow.
But I will say right place, right time, because
I think so. Yeah.
I thankfully, technology is not something that
Hmm.
scares me off, and so we were able to
Yeah.
transition to a lot of things virtually. And but yeah, it's just a gathering place. What I love about it is we when we have board meetings, they're like 90 minutes. They're by far probably the most impactful, effective, and
Mm.
organized meetings. And we get through everything on the agenda with still having time at the beginning and at the end to just talk story a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everyone there is just practicing the skill sets of facilitators and mediator, like
For
practicing the
sure.
active listening, the reframing. And it's a volunteer board. And so
Yeah.
you can definitely tell if people are passionate about the work to be able to keep coming together to do this
Hmm.
work. And it's also intergenerational. There's just everywhere from folks who are just initially joining, who are just interested in the field, students, undergrads, grad students, or recent alumni, to uh, folks who have been doing this for like 50 years now and are
Hmm.
retired but continue to love the work. And so I think that's kind of what keeps me there. Yeah, it's a good group of folks.
That's great. No, I love how you said, right place, right time in regards to, being, president in 2020 and sort of having to facilitate these online workshops. I mean, again, who knows where that organization would be if you weren't there right at that time and who you affected and who that domino that effect really mattered to, because that was such a crucial time where, and I love how you keep mentioning back, like, changing perspectives and reframing perspectives, because that was such a crucial time where I think a lot of people did start to realize our similarities and differences in so many ways, and sort of how we all do live different lives, and where do we go from here? How do we, hopefully, at least I think a lot of people are thinking, how do we, better this world? And, you to be a part of that change is really impactful and really wonderful. So really appreciate it. Um, so just change up the topic to focus on something we're focusing on at In Love Pono this month. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which obviously is very important for us being the Violence Prevention Committee at Leeward Community College. This week specifically, we're focusing on breaking toxic patterns and sort of how they help you break up with the old you. So, how does CAPS contribute to raising awareness about domestic violence and supporting survivors? I'd imagine just naturally in so many different ways, just a trickle down effect. But maybe especially during this month, do you have any highlights or points to reference?
No, thank you. And thank you for all you do to not only just this month, but throughout the year. One thing I always like to point out is that although, yes, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month,
Hmm.
we should be conscientious of
Oh yeah.
this all year round,
Hmm.
not just that one month throughout the year. And I think one of the things that I've definitely, in my time have learned is that there is no cookie cutter way to reach folks. There's you kind of yes, there's the virtual talk stories, there's the gatherings, the community dialogues. Occasionally there's exhibits that I put on because I don't know. I mean, there's this different social platforms. Obviously, we try to reach folks through Spotify and KTOH and YouTube and yeah, all the other platforms and because we never know how we're going to reach people. And I think
Hmm.
that's the beauty of it. If you try a little bit of different things. But yeah, I mean, one thing that's been kind of on my mind this month has just been the word of healing.
Hmm.
It's been not that I haven't known of the word, but we
Of course.
recently had a gathering about healing in divided times just last week. And it was by far I really enjoyed the I am one of those folks that really loves to make memories and collect experiences.
Yes.
Not so much phased by the actors and the media,
Hmm.
that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And
Sure.
so it was one of those experiences that I know I'll be able to share later on with folks. And what I love so much about these virtual talk stories is that yes, there's the beautiful things that happen that are recorded, but what I always recall is like the conversations before and after or leading up
Hmm.
to it. That's what I truly treasure. And with Auntie Lynette and Auntie Manu last week, we before we started, there was a conversation briefly about like acknowledging the healers in your life. And I thought that was so, it just kind of stayed with me. I even thought about it last night um and so yeah, just acknowledging the folks, whether it's traditional medicine, whether it's
Hmm.
non-traditional medicine, whether it's someone just being conscientious that, Band-Aids can take care of
Hmm.
you and they always have one ready.
Yeah.
Just a first aid kit, like just or just a check-in. Like, if you ever need anything, just let me know, or how can I be of service? But yeah, so I think just we did a community dialogue about performing arts, and we one of the things that kind of came about at the end of the conversation was about how performing arts is healing in different
Hmm.
ways, and acknowledging performing arts beyond just being on the stage. Someone who does video games and does gaming, that's a form of the arts as well, and acknowledging that space. Um, and providing that space for reflection, I think, is so key. So as going back to the topic of domestic violence awareness month, I think it's important to create that space for reflection, as well as creating awareness about the topics that are happening. So we do partner up with different organizations such as yours to try to spread the word further.
Hmm.
Also, we have an event coming up on next week on Tuesday, called Beyond Bars, Prison Women Speak. It's based on a
Hmm.
documentary about three women in prison who found redemption and restoration. So
Hmm.
we're gonna have we're in, it's what I love about it is in and also one of the bit of concerns is it's we're doing a hybrid format, so we will have people in
Sure.
person, but we will also have people virtually. So just the tech issue of it is why I paused a little, but yeah, we're gonna
Anyone involved with doing stuff behind the scenes or meetings knows all about that the
yes,
technicalities of the owl and
yes,
how do
yes,
we get this owl to work with us?
yes, yes,
And
but
and there's many
but
people who are looking up owl right now because they have no idea what we're talking about.
Right, right. But we're gonna show the documentary. It's like 20 minutes. The producer director Tadia Rice, she went into the women's correctional facility for a couple months and
Mhm.
put together this beautiful documentary to create a voice for the women
Mhm.
there. And so after folks watch the 20-minute documentary, we'll be joined by Tadia Rice on the panel, as well as Momi Cody, who is one of the women in the video, who's
Mhm.
now been released, and share about her own experience. And then Professor Dr. Maya Satora will be moderating that event. And so yeah, so I think it's just creating spaces for people
Yeah.
to share. I think it's so
Mhm.
important. And kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, we don't do that too much, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And so yeah, so that's kind of in a way how I don't want to say closing out the month because I think
Mhm.
it's an ongoing
Sure.
conversation, and there will be other conversations throughout the year as well, as they
Sure.
come up. And yeah, I always just share with folks, whoever's listening in the audience, if you'd love to, be a speaker, share, come together to collaborate, please let me know. Happy to do so.
Well, I just really appreciate that answer, and looking forward to that event that you're talking about on the 29th. I do think it's so important. As I haven't seen the documentary, and I don't know exactly what will be discussed in the event, but just the topic of the incarceration of women is so important to us at Love Pono because I mean there is a statistic and a huge majority of women who end up incarcerated because of retaliatory abuse or from just self-defense. So it's a whole other topic that uh, is so broad, and I think that it's outside of a lot of people's bubble. And as we were kind of talking about earlier, sometimes if it's outside of their frame or their perspective, they may not take the time to do some research on it. But it's so important in so many ways. Is part of the various aspects that make our community. Be it peace building, be it domestic violence awareness, be it just community involvement or community action. I think there's so much that can be happened just from starting that conversation. So really looking forward to the 29th. So I really appreciate you mentioning that.
No, thank you.
Jose.
And just quickly, one of the
Mhm.
brief connections to it, just to share, is just some statistics. Definitely more than 740,000 women are in prison around the world. 20,000 of them are
Mhm.
actually just here in the United States. This is all
Mhm.
from the upcoming event that we're going to be sharing. In the last 40 years, the rate of female incarceration has risen by an alarming rate of 700,000.
Hmm.
Sorry,
Hmm.
700%, which is still alarming.
Hmm.
The United States accounts for over 30% of incarcerated women in the world, yet has only 5% of the world's female population. And
Hmm.
locking up women does not improve society. And 60% of child survivors of physical violence, mental abuse, and sexual assault. Um, so, yeah, I mean, a lot of folks who are, victims of domestic violence, unfortunately, end
Sure.
up in our prison systems.
Sure.
Uh, so yeah, I think there's and I can kind of keep going on with some of the stats that were
Sure. Sure.
provided.
Sure. Sure.
And so, but yeah, thank you.
When I hear that, I'm not a historian by any means, but I can't help but think these incarceration levels have went up over a period where women have had the most freedoms and the most able and right to speak out, right? And I think there's a lot to be said on how society does silence a lot of folks, but women
Yeah,
especially. So I think that just kind of goes hand in hand, but obviously it's a broader topic, which
yeah,
everyone can learn more about on the 29th. So we'll make sure to
thank you,
put the info for that event in the description as well, and
thank
we'll
you.
share about it on our collective spaces. Yes, thank you. Jose, as we wrap up, I would like to use this time to see if you have any tips to offer to folks who may be interested in your line of work or just promoting peace in their own communities. As a conflict and peace specialist, what advice would you give to individuals or communities looking to foster healthier relationships and resolve conflicts in a peaceful manner?
One of the things that I try to do through the work that I'm doing is that, yes, it's important to know where the resources are. If you're going through situations, it's good to, yes, maybe for here at UH Manoa, I'm one of the resources. There's other resources as well. But also, if you're in the community, there's local mediation centers, there's 24/7 hotlines for domestic violence that we talked about earlier. Um, I think knowing those resources to know that you're not alone is so important. And also, if for folks who want to pursue this work, I say, yeah, besides obviously the usual, like there's lots of trainings and practice that can be done. Also looking at just what current work are you already doing that so
Hmm.
when we talk about being a peace builder, I think of it as like not only going back to, yeah, building wonderful relationships. Like think
Hmm.
about the wonderful work that you are doing currently. I remember when I used to work at the Mānoa Institute for Peace, we used to we have students majoring in peace and conflict resolution or getting an undergraduate certificate in peace studies or a graduate certificate in conflict resolution. And one of the, I would occasionally ask, especially for the students doing the major, like, oh, what do you want to do with this? And I would say like 95% of them would say, I want to be an ambassador for the United Nations,
Hmm.
which I'm like, okay, that's wonderful. But
Hmm.
I also want you to acknowledge like what you're already doing in this work
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you, Alex, are doing some amazing work right here through Love Pono, and even beyond Love Pono and just the work that you're doing. I know we're gonna do a further talk about some other wonderful projects you have on the rise. But just thinking about how do you care for your community? How do you
Hmm.
provide kindness to it? Do you have a beautiful relationship with your parents or
Hmm.
friends or, the people you spend when you go to work on a daily basis,
Hmm.
who's in your community and how do they uplift you and how do you uplift them?
Yeah.
I think that's really at the core of the peace building work or the makes it sound bad when you say work, but the
Hmm.
passion of peace building maybe or the pathway or
Yeah.
the journey, I think, yeah, just being empowering folks and letting them
Mm.
know that they too can foster these and cultivate peace is one of the
Hmm.
uh things that I've been talking about recently as well. And just yeah, I mean, start a conversation. Go beyond the usual like, good morning, how's your day going? Or,
Hmm.
look at that weather, the small talk.
Hmm.
I I sometimes get on an elevator. There's that awkward, experience of being on the elevator where folks
Mm-hmm.
sometimes don't talk to each other. And just asking, hope you have a nice day, or how are you today? Or, sometimes something that someone's like, maybe they're have a cup of coffee in their hand, and I'm like, oh, hope
Hmm.
that's a good cup. Or,
Yeah, for
you never
sure.
know where the conversation is going to go. It's like,
Yeah,
so just talking story. And then, yeah, the more you do that, I find that eventually I start realizing like, oh, so and so, like, the world isn't that big at the end of the day. Like,
sure.
there's only one Earth, and we're all on it. And yeah, there's billions of people on it, but if we look close enough, we start seeing the patterns and how we're all kind of connected, and what things we share in common. And I think that's truly the beauty of it all, I think. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think just, it's I it wasn't a straight pathway as far as like,
Mm-hmm.
I must do this to do the work that I'm doing. I reflect upon my own journey. I think about when I was in undergrad, and
Mm-hmm.
there would be cultural centers, and I noticed the cultural centers would only kind of come together when like an issue happened
Hmm.
on campus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I'd always be like, well, why aren't they just like always working together,
Yeah.
collaborating?
Yeah.
I think there's strength in numbers, and there's power in that. There's definitely a voice, a larger voice collectively.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I talked about, building bridges back then, which fast forward, I was talking about peace building, but I just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't using that terminology. Um, yeah, I mean, so yeah, just reflecting upon, I guess, once more, the dominoes or the building blocks of our lives,
Yeah.
and how are those, you never know, the transferable skills, right? Of
Yeah.
how that may impact and guide you along the way. Learning at a young age that the power of my voice was important,
Mm-hmm.
that as a youth, it's okay that I wanted to share my whatever, comments that I had about some situation that the elders were having.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that was modeling at a young age. Someone provided the space for me to do that, that I now carry that forward to
Mm-hmm.
also provide that space for others. I was talking with you this a little bit earlier, but I sometimes share with folks like, how can my positionality assist you?
Mm-hmm.
How can I be of service, I guess, moving forward? So yeah, just creating that space for folks. You never know. You never know what folks are going through. You never know what's going on in people's days, and there's so much that you never know what's going to reach folks, I guess, in the work that we do. So yeah, I mean, just providing a space for ongoing awareness and learning, and
Sure.
the dialogue and the critical thinking, I guess, is so core to the work that I do.
I think it's so wonderful. And I think, yeah, I mean, anybody listening who, wants to do similar work, like you said, start where you're at, see where your position is, where your platform is. How can you expand it? Because you never know. Like you said, you were doing peace building work before you knew you were doing peace building work. So, it's kind of how it goes. So, just really quickly, how can folks listening get in touch with you and stay up to date with the work that you're involved with? And we'll be sure to share all those resources as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So I am at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. You can probably just it's manoa.hawaii.edu/peace building, or you can just look up Google UH Manoa Peace Building, and I should be the first thing that comes up. Also, you can email me at caring@hawaii.edu. That's CARING@hawaii.edu. That's probably the quickest way. But then, yeah, I know you'll be doing a wonderful job to direct folks to all the different work that's happening. So thank you so much for this opportunity today. Really,
Of
thank
course,
you.
we really have appreciated this dialogue, just as you said many times, we all have so much to learn from each other. If we shift our perspectives, if we consider, I say this all the time, consider kind of what's outside of our bubble, because what's outside of our bubble is the whole world, is the real world. So we need to actually do that because it's 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 not all about us, but in a way, it is because once we start to do that, we start to realize, like you said, how similar these situations can be, how much we can help each other just by being active listeners, just by checking in on folks, just by really sort of, walking the walk, that we want to see, of peace, of humanity. So really appreciate everything we've been talking about today. Thank you so much, Jose, for sharing your insights and your expertise in conflict resolution as well as peace building. We encourage you all listening to learn more about CAPS and the resources available for promoting healthy relationships and resolving conflicts peacefully, which we'll be sharing in the Spotify description of this podcast, as well as the Instagram posts associated with it. So thanks everyone for listening to Live Pono, Love Pono. You've been listening on Spotify or KTUH or whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on. Thank you so much, and we hope that you have a wonderful day.